The morning chill bites through the thin glass of your bedroom window, leaving delicate frost patterns on the pane. Dust motes dance lazily in the pale light as the distant clatter of a horse-drawn cart echoes down the cobblestone street. Smoke from a dozen chimneys begins to weave into the gray sky, carrying the sharp scent of burning coal. Welcome to Unwritten Axiom. I am glad you are here. If you wish to return to these quiet histories, gently signal your presence with a subscribe. You adjust the collar of your wool dress and step into a society that has already decided who you are supposed to be. The early 1800s in America hold no patience for a woman who reaches her late 20s without a husband, leaving you branded with the quiet, pitying label of spinster. Originally a term of respect for women who spun thread to support themselves, the word has curdled into a subtle insult wrapped in fake concern. Neighbors assume you are harboring some secret heartbreak or a bitter disposition, watching you closely from behind lace curtains as you walk to the market. You simply ignore the whispers, finding solace in the absolute freedom to arrange your own parlor and dictate the rhythm of your own evening. You find that teaching offers one of the only respectable paths forward, as it becomes the most common occupation for unmarried white women by 1850. You stand at the front of a drafty classroom, chalk dust coating your fingertips, as a room full of squirming children finally falls silent under your steady gaze. The pay is a mere fraction of what a male apprentice earns, and the moral scrutiny is relentless, with strict etiquette manuals dictating that you must never laugh too loudly or walk too fast. Any hint of marital attachment would mean instant dismissal, as schools demand the undivided loyalty and pristine reputation of their female educators. Yet, despite the low wages and heavy expectations, there is a profound sense of purpose when a young student proudly recites a perfect sentence because of your patient guidance. You return by evening to the shared sanctuary of a modest boarding house, which has become a vital refuge for single women navigating the growing cities. The scent of lavender soap mingles with the aroma of overcooked cabbage in the narrow, drafty hallways. You share this space with widows, fellow teachers, and quiet rebels who have built an accidental sisterhood forged through traded magazines and shared tea. Behind these closed doors, the rigid expectations of the outside world soften into a comfortable camaraderie where no one questions your worth or your marital status. You sit by the flickering hearth, mending a hem in companionable silence, knowing that this unanchored life belongs entirely to you. Sunday morning brings a biting chill that seeps right through your wool coat as you file into the stiff wooden pew. The church air is frigid, holding the collective breath of a congregation eager to be reminded of their moral standing. You sit perfectly still, listening to the preacher expound on the virtues of a submissive and domestic wife, a pillar of the so-called cult of true womanhood. It is an unwritten doctrine demanding piety and obedience, acting as a social tether that you have firmly refused to wear. A harsh draft rattles the stained glass windows, making you shiver and pulling your thoughts away from the sermon's heavy expectations. You realize with a faint, rebellious spark that failing to meet these rigid standards gives you a peculiar kind of invisible armor against their hypocrisy. You observe the widow Barclay 2 rows ahead, her heavy black crepe practically absorbing the pale winter light filtering into the sanctuary. She commands a sudden, strange respect that is entirely denied to an unmarried woman of the exact same age. A widow is permitted to manage her late husband's estate, hire farmhands, and walk to the market without enduring a gauntlet of whispered questions. You watch how she navigates this social gray zone, turning the tragedy of her loss into a legitimate shield for her newfound autonomy. It is a messy mix of sorrow and liberation that makes you both envious of her freedom and grateful you never had to pay such a profound price for it. You tuck this observation away, cataloging the varied ways women find to survive when the primary script simply does not fit their reality. You retreat to your cramped room after the service, your fingers immediately seeking the familiar, rough texture of the indigo shawl left mysteriously on your bed. This is the silent gift economy at work, a lifeline of shared resources where unmarried women pass along mended clothing, extra biscuits, and crucial advice without ever asking for a receipt. You wrap the heavy wool around your shoulders, feeling its deliberate warmth pressing against the lingering chill of the day. There is no legal safety net for someone like you, no grand inheritance to secure your future, but these small exchanges build a fortress of mutual care. You thread a needle with practiced precision, knowing that your meticulous embroidery is just a socially acceptable cover for the political essays you write by lamplight. By midnight, the scratching of your quill against thick paper is the only sound competing with the hiss of the radiator. You are drafting an anonymous editorial regarding women's property rights, choosing each word carefully so the local newspaper might actually print it under the pseudonym of a concerned citizen. This invisible labor forms the backbone of a female shadow economy, where spinsters secretly piece together a living while maintaining the illusion of respectable idleness. The floorboards groan under the weight of an unseen neighbor pacing in the hall, a rhythmic reminder that you are surrounded by other women carving out their own hidden paths. You seal the envelope with a decisive drop of wax, finding immense satisfaction in projecting your voice into a world that insists on your silence. You awake the next morning to a timid knock at the door, finding a young girl clutching a primer and looking absolutely terrified of her upcoming teacher's exam. You usher her inside, pulling up a creaky wooden chair and calmly dismantling her fears with the same practical wisdom your own mentors once offered. The role of the spinster aunt or the unmarried teacher involves passing down knowledge and stability to a generation of girls who need to know they can survive without a wedding ring. You correct her grammar with a strict but supportive tone, watching her posture straighten as confidence replaces her initial panic. When she finally leaves with a bright, hopeful smile, you understand that your legacy is not carried in a family name, but in the minds you have steadily sharpened. You pack a single worn satchel a few months later, boarding a soot-stained train bound for the wide-open possibilities of the Western Territories. The landscape blurring past your window changes from cramped brick cities to endless stretches of red earth and ragged pines, matching the sudden expansion of your own ambitions. Frontier towns suffer from a desperate shortage of everything from lumber to lawmen, meaning a single woman is viewed as a necessary asset rather than a pitiable burden. You step onto the dusty platform of a Colorado mining settlement, instantly feeling the heavy expectations of the East Coast slipping from your tired shoulders. Here, survival completely trumps rigid etiquette, allowing you to walk down the muddy street without a chaperone and without a single neighbor questioning your marital status. The local apothecary smells intensely of crushed cedar, dried sage, and the sharp tang of medicinal alcohol stored in amber glass bottles. A woman named Josephine runs the counter with an unbothered authority, her hands stained with ink and herbs as she expertly mixes a remedy for a coughing miner. She does not ask why you are traveling alone. She simply hands you a borrowed book of poetry and offers a knowing nod that speaks volumes. This raw, unpolished community grants you a profound kind of social mobility, where your ability to teach arithmetic is valued far more than your ability to embroider a pillowcase. You breathe in the fragrant, dusty air of the shop, realizing that out here, you are finally allowed to exist as a capable person rather than a societal disappointment. You unfold a discarded newspaper one evening, your thumbs tracing the rough, cheap fiber of the page as you read the matrimonial advertisements. These columns are an odd theater of reinvention where widows, lonely farmers, and independent women seek companionship across vast distances through carefully penned letters. You read an entry from a man seeking a woman of strong character, contemplating the sheer absurdity and hidden bravery of building a bridge to a complete stranger. Thousands of women utilize these ads not necessarily to find a husband, but to secure an escape route, a business partner, or a fresh start in a place where their past cannot follow. You ultimately toss the paper into the crackling stove, choosing to embrace your hard-won solitude rather than risk your autonomy for a theoretical romance. Memories of the textile mills back east occasionally echo in your mind, specifically the deafening, mechanical scream of the looms that once dictated the lives of thousands of single women. Those crowded factory floors were grueling, yet they birthed a fierce sisterhood of workers who eventually marched into the streets to demand fair wages and basic dignity. The sound of their collective voices chanting over the industrial roar proved that unmarried women were not fragile flowers, but a formidable political force capable of shaking the foundations of the economy. You carry that same defiant energy with you into this frontier classroom, teaching your students that their minds are weapons designed for far more than polite domesticity. The schoolhouse bell rings sharply across the valley, signaling the end of the day and a triumphant continuation of your unwritten, independent life. You rock the colicky infant in the dim light of your sister's parlor, watching the firelight cast long, wavering shadows across the faded floral wallpaper. The baby finally quiets against your shoulder, a warm, heavy weight that momentarily fills the quiet emptiness of the room. Your eyes trace the meticulous stitches on the mended curtain and the repaired leg of the piano bench, silent testaments to your unpaid but essential labor. Society expects the unmarried aunt to be a perpetual fixture of convenience, always available to soothe a fever or locate a misplaced heirloom while the rest of the family sleeps. The married women are exhausted and distracted, leaving you to manage the delicate, invisible threads that hold this household together. You accept this role not out of obligation, but because your steady presence grants you a quiet, indispensable power over the family's legacy. The heavy iron latch of the asylum door is freezing against your bare palm, a stark physical warning of the boundaries placed upon unconventional women. You walk down the echoing corridor to visit a neighbor's niece, your boots striking the hard, unforgiving floorboards with a rhythm that feels entirely too loud. Helen sits perfectly still by a barred window, her hands folded in her lap, committed simply because she refused a marriage proposal and expressed a desire to study botany. The medical establishment has weaponized diagnoses like hysteria and moral insanity, trapping women in isolated rooms simply because they dared to exhibit independence or unapproved emotions. You press a freshly laundered handkerchief into her trembling fingers, the soft cotton offering a fleeting, tactile comfort in a place designed to break the spirit. You leave the imposing stone building with a renewed, fierce determination to guard your own autonomy, keenly aware of how easily a solitary woman can be erased. You stand amidst a churning sea of sensible boots and wide-brimmed hats, the air thick with the smell of trampled road dust and sharp, wool perspiration. This is a women's suffrage rally in the late 19th century, a charged atmosphere where the scent of rebellion is as palpable as the banners snapping in the wind. A woman with a jagged scar on her chin hands you a freshly printed pamphlet, the sharp odor of cheap ink lingering on the coarse paper. Unmarried women form the absolute backbone of this movement, unburdened by the need for a husband's permission and free to shout their political demands into the echoing town square. You tie a bold, bright sash around your waist, the fabric smelling faintly of the damp cellar where it was secretly dyed. Your voice joins the rising chorus of hundreds of other women, chanting for the right to vote with a ferocity that finally shatters decades of mandated silence. Morning arrives with a biting, unforgiving cold that seeps through the thin floorboards of the servants' attic before the sun even clears the horizon. Domestic service remains one of the few respectable survival routes for a single woman, demanding grueling physical labor in exchange for a narrow bed and 3 meager meals. You descend into the cavernous kitchen, where the stifling heat of the massive iron stove immediately wraps around you like a heavy, suffocating blanket. The lady of the house glides through the room, complaining about the draft while you sweat over a boiling pot of linens, your hands cracked and raw from the harsh lye soap. Despite the endless physical discomfort and the constant reminder of your lowly station, you learn to navigate this oppressive environment with practiced invisibility. You meticulously save your meager coins in a chipped teacup hidden behind a loose brick, plotting your eventual escape from this sweltering, ungrateful household. You pull the laces of your corset with a sharp, practiced tug, listening to the stiff whalebone creak as it forces your ribs into the expected, unnatural silhouette. Society demands this rigid conformity even from spinsters, masking the quiet, internal damage under the guise of respectability and moral uprightness. The doctor's pamphlets are filled with absurd theories about women who waste away from a lack of matrimonial distraction, entirely ignoring the physical trauma inflicted by these daily constraints. You occasionally read the clipped, modest obituaries of unmarried women, their entire lives reduced to a few polite sentences that never capture the true depth of their endurance. The distant toll of a church bell marks another passing, a somber sound that vibrates through the floorboards and settles deep in your aching chest. You loosen the laces just a fraction when no one is looking, taking a shallow, defiant breath that sounds incredibly loud in the empty room. Snow begins to fall in thick, lazy flakes outside a modest Boston window, softening the sharp edges of the city as you sit on a worn velvet settee. Clarara pours tea into delicate porcelain cups, her silver-streaked hair catching the warm, flickering light of the parlor fire. This unexpected reunion comes 17 years after your initial parting, a testament to the enduring, unspoken bonds forged between independent women who refuse the traditional path. The walls are lined with hundreds of books, creating a cozy, intellectual sanctuary far removed from the judging eyes of the polite society you both left behind. She reaches across the small wooden table and rests her hand over yours, the gentle pressure conveying decades of shared understanding and unwritten affection. These profound romantic friendships, often dismissed by historians as mere companionship, offer a vital emotional anchor in a world that insists on your isolation. You step out onto the newly paved sidewalk in the year 1901, the harsh, artificial buzz of electric street lamps cutting through the damp evening fog. The rhythmic clatter of a typewriter drifts from an open office window, a mechanical heartbeat signaling the arrival of the so-called new woman who rides bicycles and reads Darwin. You have survived the suffocating expectations of the previous century, transitioning from a pitted spinster into a seasoned, independent writer who publishes unapologetic essays under your own name. A young girl in your boarding house storms into your room, her fiery complaints about unequal inheritances mingling with the scent of the strong black tea you calmly pour for her. You look out over the changing city skyline, feeling the crisp, modern wind against your face as the old rules slowly begin to crumble. You are completely unanchored, unmarried, and entirely your own, ready to face this bustling new era with a pen in your hand and absolutely no regrets. You navigate the crowded floor of the telegraph office. The air practically vibrates with the frantic, mechanical rhythm of a dozen brass keys tapping in unison. The sharp scent of machine oil and ozone clings to your woolen skirt as you slide into your assigned wooden chair. This modern labor requires a terrifying speed. It demands your fingers fly across the heavy typewriter keys to transcribe messages of commerce and distant tragedy. You ignore the hovering floor manager, a man who expects deference but relies entirely on your unbroken concentration. The bell on your carriage dings with a bright, piercing clarity. You slam the carriage back with the heel of your hand, a deeply satisfying motion that punctuates your hard-earned financial independence. Gaslight flickers from the brass fixtures mounted along the towering oak shelves. It casts long, wavering shadows across the grand reading room of the public library. Rows of leather-bound volumes stretch toward the painted ceiling, offering a silent, monumental testament to centuries of hoarded knowledge. A quiet rustle of turning pages drifts from the adjacent tables. Other solitary figures sit hunched over thick reference books in the dim periphery. The librarian, a stern woman with a silver watch pinned to her collar, catches your eye and offers a slow, respectful nod. Here, surrounded by the heavy scent of decaying paper and floor wax, your status as an unmarried woman is entirely eclipsed by your status as a dedicated patron. You spread your research notes across the smooth mahogany table, losing yourself completely in the dense history of labor laws. You step through the heavy revolving doors of the new department store. A wave of artificial heat and the overwhelming fragrance of imported perfume immediately envelopes you. The sprawling aisles display a dizzying array of mass-produced goods, from delicate bone china to sturdy, factory-made boots designed for the modern pedestrian. Your gloved hand grazes a bolt of rich crimson velvet. The fabric is impossibly soft and thick against your fingertips. A young clerk with exhausted eyes hurries over to offer assistance, her forced smile betraying the aching reality of standing on her feet for 10 straight hours. You purchase a fresh bottle of dark blue ink and a box of expensive, cream-colored stationery without needing to consult a husband's ledger. The small, wrapped package sits heavily in your satchel, a tangible reminder that your money belongs to no one but yourself. Outside, a sudden autumn downpour has turned the cobblestones slick and dark. They reflect the harsh glare of the new electric street lamps in shivering puddles. The biting wind whips down the narrow avenue. It carries the bitter, roasted aroma of coffee from a corner cafe that caters to the late-night crowds. You pull your collar high against your neck, feeling the icy dampness seep into the heavy wool as you weave quickly through the rushing pedestrians. A passing carriage splashes a fan of dirty water onto the curb, narrowly missing your sturdy leather boots by mere inches. The sharp chill makes the warm, glowing windows of your boarding house appear incredibly inviting through the driving rain. You press your key into the brass lock with a satisfying click, eager to retreat into the absolute sovereignty of your private room. You strike a long wooden match against the brick hearth. The sudden flare of sulfur banishes the deep, clinging shadows from the corners of your bedroom. The dry kindling catches with a series of sharp, violent pops, slowly building into a steady fire that pushes the damp chill from the plaster walls. You shed your wet coat and drape it over a wooden chair. You shiver slightly as the contrasting warmth of the flames finally reaches your cold hands. A tin kettle whistles softly on the small iron stove, promising the deep, internal comfort of dark tea on a bitter night. You arrange your newly purchased stationery on the small writing desk, running your palm flat across the pristine paper to feel its satisfying, expensive texture. The storm continues to batter the glass window pane, but the fierce weather only amplifies the profound, unshakable peace you have built inside this solitary sanctuary. Saturday mornings always lead you to a small, bustling bakery on the corner of Elm Street. The air inside is eternally thick with the comforting scent of yeast and melting butter. The brass bell above the door jingles brightly as you enter. It announces your arrival to the flour-dusted proprietor who already has your usual order prepared on the wooden counter. You exchange a few coins for a warm, paper-wrapped loaf of rye bread and a small jar of sharp, preserved mustard. A group of men in dark suits argues loudly over a newspaper at the corner table, their voices blending into a meaningless, roaring backdrop. You ignore their bluster entirely, choosing instead to focus on the satisfying crunch of the crust as you tear off a warm piece for the walk home. This simple, unhurried ritual is a luxury afforded only by your deliberate choice to live outside the chaotic demands of a traditional family household. Afternoon light filters through the canopy of ancient elm trees in the city park. It casts a dappled, golden net across the wide gravel pathways where citizens stroll in the fading warmth. Children chase wooden hoops down the gentle slopes, their high, breathless laughter floating above the low, steady rumble of the distant streetcars. You sit on a green wooden bench with a heavy volume of essays resting comfortably in your lap. The rough canvas binding feels familiar beneath your bare fingers. A sudden breeze rattles the dry, amber leaves still clinging to the branches, sending a small shower of them drifting onto your open pages. A young mother pushes a heavy perambulator past your bench, her face pale and drawn tight with a profound, unspoken exhaustion. You watch her disappear down the curving path, feeling a complex mixture of quiet empathy and intense gratitude for your own unburdened life. You step onto the polished hardwood floor of a modern photography studio, the air sharp with the metallic scent of processing chemicals and magnesium powder. The photographer, a meticulous man with ink-stained fingertips, directs you toward a velvet-backed chair that feels unnecessarily grand for a solitary portrait. You adjust the high, stiff lace collar of your sensible shirtwaist, ignoring his polite suggestion to perhaps soften your expression for the heavy camera lens. The sudden, blinding flash captures your unsmiling face in a brilliant burst of white light, preserving the exact likeness of a woman who belongs entirely to herself. You pay for the session with coins drawn from your own leather purse, securing a photographic record that will never sit on a husband's mantelpiece. It is a defiant declaration of existence, printed on thick cardstock to be filed away or mailed to a distant friend who truly understands the value of an independent life. You wait in the long, shuffling line at the municipal post office, where the high, arched windows illuminate floating dust kicked up by dozens of impatient citizens. The cavernous hall smells strongly of damp canvas bags and melting sealing wax as you slowly advance toward the iron-grated counter. A clerk with a green visor hands over a bundle of correspondence tied in rough twine, recognizing your face without needing to ask for your surname. You flip through the envelopes with a practiced thumb, noting the varied handwriting of women scattered across the country who have also chosen the solitary path. These letters are the vital arteries of your chosen family, carrying shared triumphs, subtle warnings, and the intimate details of lives lived outside the traditional margins. You tuck the precious bundle deep into your wool coat, carrying the weight of their words like a hidden shield against the bustling, indifferent city. You grip the curved rubber handles of your new bicycle, feeling the satisfying mechanical vibration of the chain as you push off down the paved boulevard. The crisp autumn wind catches the hem of your divided skirt, a scandalous garment that prioritizes your physical freedom over the suffocating expectations of polite society. You pedal with a fierce, rhythmic energy, your breathing quickening as you effortlessly pass horse-drawn carriages bogged down in the muddy ruts of the crossing street. The physical exertion brings a flush to your cheeks and a profound, soaring sense of autonomy that no cramped parlor could ever provide. Pedestrians pause on the sidewalks to stare, their expressions ranging from outright shock to begrudging admiration, but their opinions simply wash over you without leaving a mark. You ring the small brass bell on your handlebars, a bright, metallic chime that clears your path and announces your unyielding presence to the changing world. Shadows gather in the steep, curving tiers of the university lecture hall, where the air is thick with the scent of wool coats and burning pipe tobacco. A visiting scholar stands at the heavy wooden podium, speaking passionately about the recent advancements in botanical science and the vital importance of rigorous classification. You sit near the front row with a small leather notebook resting on your knee, your pencil scratching out quick, precise observations in the low gaslight. The murmuring crowd is overwhelmingly male, yet you claim your space with an uncompromising posture that dares anyone to question your intellectual right to be there. An older gentleman next to you shifts uncomfortably, clearly unnerved by a woman who takes meticulous notes instead of merely decorating the adjacent seat. The academic environment is rigid and unwelcoming, but you absorb the complex information with a hungry mind that refuses to be starved of genuine substance. You slide into a narrow wooden booth at a corner tea shop, the polished table smooth and cool beneath your resting forearms. The rich, earthy aroma of dark roasted coffee and spiced pastry fills the cramped space, offering a temporary sanctuary from the relentless noise of the industrial avenue. You carefully unfold a morning newspaper, the cheap newsprint leaving a faint, gray smudge of ink against the pads of your fingers. A waitress in a crisp white apron sets a steaming porcelain cup before you, moving with the silent, exhausted efficiency of someone who has been on her feet since dawn. You read the headlines concerning labor strikes and political reform, silently drafting your next anonymous editorial while sipping the scalding, bitter liquid. This public solitude is a hard-won luxury, a moment where you are neither serving a family nor answering to an employer, simply existing in the hushed center of your own thoughts. By nightfall, the ambient hum of the city fades into a low, constant rumble that vibrates faintly through the glass panes of your boarding house window. The room smells faintly of the camphor you use to protect your winter woolens, a sharp, clean scent that grounds you in the familiar routine of domestic independence. You wind the brass clock on your nightstand, the gears clicking with a precise, satisfying rhythm that dictates the boundaries of your own personal time. A small iron needle flashes in the candlelight as you mend a frayed seam on your walking skirt, your hands moving with an automated grace honed over decades of self-reliance. The fire in the small stove pops loudly, sending a brief flare of orange light dancing across the faded wallpaper and the stack of library books piled on your desk. You pull a heavy quilt up to your chin, surrendering to the deep, dreamless sleep of a woman who carries absolutely no burdens but her own. You push open the heavy glass door of an independent bookstore, setting off a delicate silver chime that alerts the proprietor in the cluttered back room. The space is tightly packed with towering, uneven stacks of newly printed volumes, smelling intensely of fresh binding glue and pressed paper. You run a gloved finger along the pristine spines, searching for a specific collection of radical political essays that the larger department stores refuse to carry. A young woman with ink on her cuffs approaches to offer assistance, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as she pulls the requested text from a hidden shelf. You exchange a knowing smile as you hand over your coins, silently acknowledging the subversive thrill of purchasing dangerous ideas with your own unmonitored wages. The heavy book settles into your satchel like a brick, a solid, tangible piece of ammunition for the mind that you will consume ravenously by the light of your own fire. Frost coats the iron railings along the river walk, reflecting the harsh, modern glare of the electrified bridge lamps suspended above the dark, rushing water. A biting current of freezing air whips off the river's surface, forcing pedestrians to lower their heads and bury their freezing faces into thick woolen scarves. You walk with a brisk, unyielding stride, your heavy leather boots crushing the thin layer of ice that has formed over the uneven cobblestones. The physical harshness of the weather is strangely exhilarating, stripping away the artificial pleasantries of the city and leaving only the stark reality of survival against the elements. A passing ferry blasts its heavy steam horn, the deep, vibrating tone resonating right through your ribcage and echoing off the brick facades of the waterfront warehouses. The freezing night holds absolutely no terror for a woman who has already survived the infinitely colder isolation of a society that constantly tried to erase her. You step onto the vibrating floorboards of the newspaper printing plant. The deafening roar of industrial progress immediately overwhelms your unprotected senses. Massive iron rotary presses clatter with a relentless, mechanical rhythm that completely drowns out human speech. Ink-stained operators shout clipped commands while adjusting enormous rolls of cheap paper. You hand your handwritten editorial directly to the frantic typesetter, completely ignoring his surprised stare. The heavy gears grind and shriek, rapidly stamping thousands of identical words onto blank broadsheets. This thunderous environment offers absolutely no parlor pleasantries. It only provides the raw, unapologetic volume of a new century demanding to be heard. Condensation streams down the curved glass walls of the Municipal Botanical Conservatory. It completely blurs the gray, frozen cityscape outside. The humid interior preserves a vibrant, artificial jungle of towering ferns and brilliant orchids. A group of wealthy matrons in restrictive corset strolls past the exotic palms. Their judgmental gazes linger briefly on your unchaperoned presence before turning away. Their elaborate feathered hats bob like exotic birds among the dark green foliage. You pull a small magnifying glass from your pocket to examine the intricate veins of a rare pitcher plant. The vivid colors and architectural beauty of the glasshouse provide a perfect, hushed refuge for an independent mind. You stand motionless on a low wooden pedestal. A pragmatically minded seamstress pins the heavy tweed fabric of a new walking suit. The durable wool scratches comfortably against your cotton blouse, promising absolute protection against biting winds. She yanks a measuring tape snugly around your waist, completely ignoring the traditional hourglass ideal in favor of unrestricted mobility. You run your thumbs over the wide, reinforced pockets sewn deeply into the jacket. The sharp prick of a stray needle barely registers against your tough knuckles. This masculine-leaning tailoring feels incredibly grounding. It anchors you firmly to the earth with its substantial, unyielding weight. Exhaust fumes from idling locomotives drift heavily through the cavernous arches of the main terminal. They mingle with the bitter scent of roasted peanuts sold by a nearby vendor. The grand waiting room smells overwhelmingly of wet wool and oiled leather. Crowds of anxious travelers press tightly together, their diverse perfumes and stale tobacco smoke creating a suffocating atmosphere of constant transit. A frantic mother drags two weeping toddlers past your wooden bench. Her lavender water completely fails to mask the sour odor of sheer panic. You inhale the pungent cocktail of industrial progress without the slightest intention of purchasing a ticket. Sitting perfectly still in this olfactory hurricane reminds you of the profound luxury of remaining stationary. You drop a single copper penny into the narrow slot of a wooden kinetoscope cabinet. The glowing electric bulb inside generates a sudden, localized heat. The cramped arcade parlor is stiflingly hot. Curious patrons radiate body warmth as they huddle around the row of novel entertainment machines. You press your face against the cold brass viewer for a brief, startling contrast. The internal mechanism begins to whir, and a flickering sequence of moving photographs dances across the small lens. The enclosed space quickly becomes oppressive as more spectators crowd into the narrow aisle. You step backward into the drafty corridor, relishing the sudden rush of cool, refreshing air against your flushed cheeks. You hear shrill cries of immigrant vendors echo sharply off the brick facades of the open-air market. They create a chaotic symphony of commerce and survival. The heavy, Wooden wheels of delivery carts grind brutally over the uneven cobblestones. You pause before a vibrant stall piled high with imported citrus. The rough-skinned oranges offer a shocking burst of color against the drab, gray street. The merchant rattles off a rapid-fire string of prices in broken English. His booming voice easily cuts through the ambient roar of the morning rush. You toss 2 bright silver dimes onto his wooden scale to finalize the swift transaction. You cross the polished marble floor of the downtown Savings and Trust. Your reflection is captured perfectly in the gleaming, spotless tiles. Imposing granite columns rise toward an ornate, gilded ceiling designed to project masculine authority. You slide your leather-bound bankbook under the intricate wrought-iron grille of the teller's cage. He examines your neatly recorded deposits with absolute, unblinking composure. His eyes scan the columns of black ink that prove your slow accumulation of independent wealth. A shaft of brilliant morning sunlight pierces the high clerestory windows. It illuminates a swirling galaxy of dust motes hovering directly above the counting desks. Wind whips viciously around the exposed corner of the intersection. It tears a loose sheet of newsprint from a heavily laden wooden stand. The rough, fibrous paper scrapes violently against your gloved hand. You reach out to catch the runaway page before it vanishes down a dark alley. An older newsboy with cracked, chapped lips hands you the evening edition. The damp ink immediately transfers a sticky residue onto your fingertips. You fold the broadsheet tightly under your arm, the sharp crease pressing uncomfortably into your side. This physical battle against the hostile weather only hardens your impenetrable exterior. You strike a final match against the rough brickwork of your private fireplace. The harsh, sulphurous tang of ignition instantly fills the cramped room. Seasoned oak logs catch quickly, releasing the comforting aroma of wood smoke and dried sap. You uncork a small glass bottle of imported lavender water. A single drop on your wrists combats the lingering smell of city grime and hoarse exhaust. A loaf of rye bread sits on the wooden counter, its yeasty scent mingling with the metallic odor of your iron stove. The distinct lack of stale cigar smoke provides a daily, olfactory reminder of your sovereign territory. You breathe deeply into the layered fragrances of a home that belongs to no one else. Midnight brings a plunging, bitter cold that coats your single window pane with crystalline frost. The heavy iron radiator in the corner hisses violently against the freezing drafts. You wrap a heated soapstone in a thick flannel cloth. You press its intense, radiating warmth against the frozen arches of your aching feet. The contrast between the freezing ambient air and the burning stone sends a sudden shiver up your rigid spine. You pull the heavy, patchwork quilt much tighter around your shoulders. You are entirely responsible for maintaining your own survival in this frigid, unforgiving season. The fierce, internal fire of your independence keeps the core of your spirit perpetually, defiantly warm. You wander slowly through the echoing, cavernous halls of the newly established Municipal Art Museum. Your boot heels click sharply against the polished terrazzo floors. The vast, vaulted ceilings amplify every hushed whisper from the sparse crowd of late-afternoon patrons. A uniformed guard jingles a heavy ring of brass keys in his pocket. The metallic clinking serves as a rhythmic metronome to your unhurried contemplation. You stand before a massive landscape painting, ignoring the pretentious murmuring of an art critic nearby. The resonant chime of a grandfather clock announces the approaching closing hour with booming finality. You absorb the complex acoustics of the institution, perfectly content to exist as a silent observer. You watch dawn bleed a pale, sickly yellow light across the jagged industrial skyline. The dark smog hangs stubbornly over the waking city. Harsh morning illumination reveals every speck of dust dancing over your writing desk. It highlights the sharp, black ink of the editorial you finished hours ago. You hold the paper up to the glowing window. The stark contrast of your precise handwriting stands out boldly against the translucent, ivory sheet. Outside, the glowing yellow lamps of early delivery carts begin to extinguish one by one. You observe your own faint reflection in the glass, noting the deep, permanent lines that map a lifetime of unapologetic rebellion. You adjust the substantial vulcanized rubber headset over your ears, feeling the firm pinch of the metal band against your hair. The telephone exchange hums with the frantic voices of female operators plugging brass cords into a massive switchboard. You smoothly insert a metal jack into a blinking socket. The connection links a bustling downtown bank to a distant shipping warehouse. This complex web of copper wire relies entirely on the unseen labor of independent women. The work is exhausting. A strict supervisor paces the narrow aisle behind you, demanding absolute courtesy and uncompromising speed. You navigate the chaotic flow of human connection with practiced detachment, safely remaining an anonymous conduit for the changing world. The pungent aroma of boiling cabbage and strong carbolic soap fills the cavernous kitchen of the neighborhood settlement house. Dedicated reformers chop vegetables and stir massive iron vats of soup. The dining hall is packed. You hand a warm loaf of crusty bread to a tired mother. She offers a frail smile of exhausted solidarity. This radical community project rejects traditional charity in favor of genuine, shared existence without moral judgment. A young resident physician vigorously scrubs her hands at the tin basin before hurrying toward the makeshift clinic upstairs. You wipe down the long wooden tables with a rough linen cloth, finding profound purpose in this unromanticized labor. You climb the steep iron staircase to the elevated railway platform, your breath pluming in the crisp air. The sprawling metropolis stretches out beneath you. A chaotic patchwork of brick tenements and towering steel structures reaches arrogantly toward the gray clouds. A deafening steam locomotive roars into the station. Its massive iron wheels shriek against the curved steel tracks with terrifying intensity. You step into the crowded wooden carriage, gripping a polished leather strap as the train lurches violently forward. Businessmen in bowler hats and factory workers in soot-stained caps sway together in the cramped compartment. The rapid perspective offers a thrilling, voyeuristic glimpse into second-story windows blurring past the glass. Dust motes drift lazily through a shaft of afternoon sunlight illuminating the cluttered workbench of a neighborhood horologist. You run your thumb over the smooth, polished silver casing of a pocket watch. The intricate floral engravings feel cool against your skin. An elderly watchmaker adjusts a jewelless loop over his right eye. He meticulously replaces a microscopic gear using delicate steel tweezers. The shop smells intensely of fine machine oil and aged brass. It is a sanctuary of precision. He hands the resurrected watch back to you, its steady ticking vibrating faintly against your bare palm like a mechanical heartbeat. You step onto the wet, hexagonal tiles of the newly constructed municipal bathhouse. A thick cloud of billowing steam immediately envelops your shivering frame. The intense, humid heat melts away the deep chill accumulated during the long walk across the frozen city. Dozens of women from various neighborhoods share this vast, echoing space. Their voices bounce off the glazed porcelain walls in a muted aquatic symphony. You plunge into the heated central pool. The scalding water shocks your skin before expanding into a profound, soothing warmth. This public sanctuary offers working-class spinsters a rare, luxurious moment of absolute physical release. Gaslight softly illuminates the ornate plaster molding of the civic auditorium. Hundreds of citizens have gathered for a highly anticipated lecture on global exploration. You find a comfortable seat in the second balcony, resting your elbows on the velvet railing. A renowned female explorer projects hand-painted magic lantern slides onto a massive canvas screen. The vibrant images of distant desert ruins captivate the audience. They prove definitively that women can survive far beyond the domestic sphere. You furiously scribble notes in a small leather-bound journal. Her booming voice dismantles centuries of restrictive gender assumptions with every thrilling anecdote of discovery. You gently push open the frost-covered glass door of a private botanical conservatory. You step from the harsh winter street into an impossible, thriving jungle. The dense, humid air smells overwhelmingly of rich potting soil and blooming jasmine vines. Condensation drips rhythmically from the arched glass ceiling. The silence is absolute. It lands with soft splatters on the broad leaves of a rubber plant. This meticulously engineered environment preserves fragile life against the freezing northern climate. It feels like a perfect metaphor for your own carefully constructed independence. Midnight settles over the sleeping city, silencing the frantic clatter of the streets. Only the low, distant moan of a foghorn echoes from the harbor. You unlace your stiff leather boots. A sudden release of pressure allows blood to rush back into your exhausted feet. The smooth, cool cotton sheets of your narrow bed offer a welcoming embrace after 18 hours of continuous labor. You turn the brass knob of the gas lamp, plunging the small room into a protective darkness. Outside your window, a single electric street lamp casts an angular shadow across your faded floral wallpaper. This unshared bed and entirely self-directed life remain a masterpiece of quiet defiance. You step into the cavernous brick icehouse just as the delivery wagons begin to load their massive cargo. A profound, shocking cold radiates from the enormous blocks of frozen lake water stacked precariously toward the vaulted ceiling. The foreman exhales a thick cloud of white vapor while directing the laborious with short, clipped gestures. You grip the wooden handle of your sturdy canvas market bag, feeling the bitter chill penetrate the thick leather of your gloves. This daily pilgrimage ensures your perishable groceries remain fresh in the zinc icebox sitting in your private kitchen. The intense physical sensation of this freezing sanctuary wakes your mind far better than any cup of black coffee. Overhead, the complex brass belts of the department store's pneumatic tube system rattle with a frantic, metallic urgency. Small cylindrical canisters shoot through the transparent pipes, carrying cash and receipts between the bustling sales floors and the hidden accounting offices. The notions counter is a symphony of commerce, featuring the hollow clatter of wooden thread spools and the distinct snip of weighty iron shears. You purchase a dozen yards of durable black ribbon from a young clerk who shouts prices over the mechanical din. The cacophony of modern retail represents a chaotic freedom where women freely exchange their own wages for goods. You climb the narrow, creaking staircase that leads directly to the flat, tar-papered roof of your boarding house. The sprawling city skyline reveals itself in a breathtaking panorama of jagged brick chimneys and billowing plumes of factory smoke. The late afternoon sun paints the industrial horizon in brilliant, unnatural shades of bruised purple and fiery orange. You string a thick line of damp laundry between two wooden poles, watching the white cotton billow dramatically against the soot-stained sky. This elevated vantage point provides a rare, sweeping perspective of the modern metropolis that you navigate entirely on your own terms. Inside the hushed sanctuary of your room, the stout linen paper of a freshly arrived letter feels pleasantly textured beneath your bare fingertips. You slide a dull silver letter opener through the wax seal, enjoying the satisfying, fibrous tear of the thick envelope. The elaborate cursive script belongs to a former teaching colleague who recently relocated to a distant farming community in the Dakota Territory. You trace the dried ink with a cautious thumb, absorbing the tactile reality of a friendship maintained entirely through written correspondence. The weight of the pages in your hand serves as a tangible anchor to a sprawling network of fiercely independent women. You enter the neighborhood apothecary, immediately encountering a dense, overwhelming cloud of dried peppermint and crushed eucalyptus. The walls are completely lined with miniature wooden drawers and amber glass bottles that protect light-sensitive tinctures from degrading. The pharmacist carefully grinds a custom blend of medicinal roots in a dense marble mortar, releasing a sharp, earthy aroma that clears your sinuses instantly. You purchase a glass vial of concentrated rosewater to combat the harsh, alkaline soap provided by the boarding house laundress. The fragrant purchase is a minor luxury, representing the deliberate choices that define your sovereign daily existence. Thunder echoes abruptly down the narrow avenue, bringing a sudden, plunging drop in the muggy afternoon temperature. Large drops of icy rain begin to aggressively splatter against the dusty cobblestones, forcing pedestrians to scramble for any available shelter. You duck beneath the vibrant striped canvas awning of a corner tobacconist, shivering slightly as the chilled wind whips the damp hem of your walking skirt. The rapid shift from oppressive summer heat to freezing downpour leaves the urban air feeling incredibly raw and electrified. A stark contrast. You stand shoulder to shoulder with strangers, united briefly by the unpredictable hostility of the shifting weather. You drop a single nickel into the slot of the neighborhood's newly installed phonograph machine. A hollow, mechanical scratching precedes the tinny, miraculous sound of a recorded brass band playing a lively march. The music echoes faintly through the brass ear tubes, fighting against the ambient noise of the crowded parlor. A group of young working girls gathers around an adjacent machine, their breathless laughter harmonizing with the automated entertainment. You close your eyes to isolate the astonishing audio recording, marveling at how technology continues to shrink the vast, isolating distances of the world. Brilliant flashes of magnesium powder illuminate the grand interior of the Municipal Exhibition Hall. A traveling photography exhibit displays stark, contrasting images of Western landscapes and crowded Eastern slums mounted on large wooden easels. You study a particularly haunting portrait of a weary textile worker, noting the deep, ink-black shadows that perfectly capture her exhausting reality. The raw visual honesty of the silver gelatin prints completely strips away the romanticized illusions of the previous century. This unvarnished perspective perfectly mirrors your own pragmatic approach to surviving as an unanchored woman in a rapidly industrializing society. You trace the intricate, embossed floral pattern on the leather cover of your newest journal. The stiff, unyielding spine cracks satisfyingly as you force the blank pages to lay flat against your narrow writing desk. You uncap your fountain pen, enjoying the slick, frictionless glide of the metal nib across the pristine, cream-colored paper. Documenting your unfiltered thoughts provides a crucial, tactile release for the complex emotions generated by a lifetime of defying social expectations. The physical act of pressing ink into paper permanently validates an existence that the broader culture constantly attempts to erase. Evening preparations in the communal kitchen release a savory, mouth-watering aroma of roasting root vegetables and seasoned mutton. The sharp, acidic tang of boiling vinegar cuts through the heavier scents as the landlady begins her annual pickling process. You slice a crusty heel of dark pumpernickel bread, inhaling the deep, molasses-rich fragrance of the dense crumb. Sharing this aromatic, bustling space with a half-dozen other unmarried residents transforms a simple meal into an act of communal solidarity. The rich tapestry of culinary smells completely replaces the sterile isolation that traditionalists assume must dominate a spinster's life. You press your aching back against the intensely radiating heat of the cast-iron parlor stove. The blistering metal warms your chilled muscles with an aggressive, necessary comfort after a grueling day of navigating the frozen city blocks. A fellow boarder passes you a steaming mug of spiced cider, the scalding porcelain nearly burning the sensitive pads of your fingers. You cradle the hot beverage carefully, letting the ascending steam thaw your frozen nose and eyelashes. This shared, thermal sanctuary provides an essential fortress against both the literal winter and the figurative coldness of the outside world. You ascend the spiral wooden staircase of the municipal clock tower, the heavy brass key clinking softly against the iron railing with every upward step. The colossal gears of the main timepiece grind with a slow, deafening rhythm that reverberates through the soles of your leather boots and rattles your very teeth. A flock of startled pigeons takes flight from the upper belfry, their wings beating the stale air with a rapid, percussive thrum that echoes down the narrow brick shaft. The elderly caretaker allows you to assist in winding the secondary weights, a massive metal chain clattering loudly over the grease-stained winch. You stand perfectly still in the mechanical heart of the city, letting the relentless, rhythmic ticking drown out the chaotic noise of the streets far below. This vibrating, hidden sanctuary offers a powerful reminder that time moves strictly forward, dragging the reluctant world into a modern age where women like you can finally forge their own distinct paths. Outside the frosted glass of the swaying streetcar, the sprawling metropolis blurs into a mesmerizing watercolor of electric light and driving rain. Streaks of brilliant yellow and stark white from the newly installed theater marquees reflect sharply against the slick, black asphalt of the flooded avenue. You secure your grip on the polished wooden backrest of the forward seat, watching the steady, hypnotic sweep of the conductor's gloved hand wiping moisture from the front pane. The diverse faces of your fellow passengers are illuminated in brief, dramatic flashes every time the exterior trolley pole sparks violently against the overhead wire. You observe this rolling cross-section of humanity with silent fascination, noting the exhausted posture of a factory girl and the stiff, defensive collar of an aging bank clerk. The rhythmic swaying of the carriage lulls your racing thoughts into a temporary, peaceful trance as you traverse the vast urban landscape entirely unchaperoned. You navigate the narrow, maze-like aisles of the wholesale spice warehouse near the harbor, instantly enveloped by the intoxicating aroma of crushed clove and dried cinnamon bark. Huge burlap sacks are stacked haphazardly against the damp brick walls, releasing pungent clouds of yellow turmeric and sharp black pepper whenever the dockworkers heave them onto wooden pallets. The air is thick and heavy with the earthy, sweet scent of imported vanilla beans sweating inside their tightly sealed tin containers. You negotiate the purchase of a small paper packet of whole nutmeg, inhaling the woody, fragrant spice that will eventually transform your simple morning oatmeal into a remarkable luxury. This olfactory journey transports your senses far beyond the gray, slush-filled streets of the northern city, offering a vivid mental escape to tropical climates you will likely never see. You exit back into the freezing dampness of the harbor, carrying the exotic perfumes of the world tucked safely inside your wool coat pocket. Biting winter wind tears across the exposed iron fire escape, immediately numbing your cheeks and stealing the breath straight from your lungs. The freezing metal grating saps the warmth from your slipper-clad feet, sending sharp, icy shocks up your legs despite the thick flannel of your nightgown. You lean heavily against the frosted railing to survey the sleeping neighborhood, stubbornly refusing to retreat into the stifling heat of the radiator-warmed apartment. A solitary snowflake drifts down to land directly on your bare wrist, melting instantly into a freezing droplet against your feverish, flushed skin. You embrace this intense, plunging cold as a harsh but necessary reminder of your physical resilience, letting the brutal temperature clear the lingering exhaustion from your overactive mind. The shivering discomfort is a surprisingly welcome sensation, proving that you are fully alive and capable of withstanding environments that polite society insists are too harsh for a woman. You kneel carefully on the worn woven rug in your bedroom, lifting the heavy, domed lid of a brass-bound cedar trunk that smells faintly of dried lavender. Your fingertips trace the delicate, brittle edges of a stack of old theater programs, feeling the rough texture of the aged paper crumbling slightly under your gentle pressure. A layer of smooth, cool silk rests beneath the discarded papers, its slippery surface catching the calluses on your hands as you fold the salvaged fabric. You unearth a small, intricately carved wooden box filled with polished glass buttons, running your hand through the hard spheres like a miser counting solitary coins. This tactile exploration of your curated possessions grounds you firmly in the physical reality of a life built entirely by your own hands and choices. You close the heavy lid with a definitive thud, satisfied that the tangible evidence of your independence is safely stored and completely under your control. Brightly colored pigments line the wooden shelves of the narrow art supply shop, offering a sudden, brilliant oasis of cadmium red and cobalt blue amid the dreary winter afternoon. The shopkeeper hums a low, off-key melody while vigorously grinding a new batch of oil paint with a heavy glass muller against a thick marble slab. You select a set of fine sable brushes, testing the flexible, resilient bristles against the sensitive skin of your inner wrist to ensure their exceptional quality. The rhythmic, scraping sound of the muller mixes with the sharp, melodic chime of the front door, creating a soothing symphony of focused, creative labor. You leave the store with your modest purchases wrapped in brown paper, feeling a subtle thrill at the prospect of filling blank canvases with your own distinct vision of the world. This small financial investment in your own creativity represents another vital step away from the mandated domestic chores that consume the lives of your married peers. You claim a small, circular table in the corner of the Bohemian coffee house, drawing a deep breath of the intensely bitter, roasted beans that perfume the warm air. The thick, white porcelain mug warms your chilled palms, sending a comforting, radiant heat straight up your forearms as you observe the bustling room. A group of young, spirited women at the adjacent table passionately debates a recent political manifesto, their words punctuated by the sharp clinking of silver spoons against ceramic saucers. You take a slow, deliberate sip of the dark, scalding liquid, letting the earthy flavor linger on your tongue while you listen to their unapologetic demands for equality. This vibrant, aromatic space serves as an intellectual refuge for unanchored souls, providing the vital nourishment of both strong coffee and fierce, independent thought. You open your leather journal and uncap your pen, ready to add your own distinct voice to the rising chorus of a brand new century. You push open the heavy oak door of a specialized cartography shop, instantly mesmerized by the vibrant, hand-tinted maps that wallpaper the cramped interior. The visual feast of seafoam greens and ochre continents stretches across massive parchment sheets, charting the vast, rapidly expanding borders of the modern world. An elderly mapmaker with ink-stained spectacles carefully unrolls a pristine, copperplate engraving of the African coastline under the bright glare of a hanging gas lamp. You trace the intricate, sweeping lines of an uncharted river with your gloved index finger, imagining the dense, untamed jungles that exist far beyond the gray urban sprawl. The sheer scale of these global depictions makes your solitary life feel beautifully insignificant, granting you a profound sense of liberating anonymity while proving that an unchaperoned woman can traverse the entire globe simply by studying a beautifully illustrated atlas. Intense waves of dry heat radiate from the open brick kiln, warping the air inside the hushed, cluttered glass-blowing studio on the edge of the industrial district. A muscular artisan in a leather apron expertly twirls a long, hollow steel blowpipe, keeping a glowing gather of molten silica perfectly centered against the pull of gravity. The blinding orange core of the hot glass illuminates the dark, soot-stained workshop, casting erratic, dancing shadows across the scattered tools and cooling racks. You watch in absolute fascination as he blows a firm stream of air into the pipe, forcing the viscous material to expand into a delicate, translucent sphere. The sharp contrast between the freezing winter drafts leaking through the window frames and the blistering heat of the furnace creates a dizzying, electrifying microclimate. This fiery transformation of raw sand into exquisite art mirrors the ongoing, radical reinvention of your own fiercely independent life in this new century. You stand near the towering, reinforced glass windows of a newly constructed steel-framed skyscraper, gazing down at the bustling, miniature city streets 30 stories below. The sweeping, panoramic view reveals a chaotic grid of moving horse-drawn cabs. Occasional sputtering motorcars navigate the thoroughfares, all reduced to the size of children's tin toys. You press your flattened palm against the cool, thick pane, feeling a subtle, terrifying vibration as the massive architectural marvel sways gently against the high-altitude winds. The fading afternoon sunlight glints sharply off the gilded domes and slate roofs of neighboring structures, painting the urban horizon in brilliant strokes of copper and gold. This breathtaking, vertical elevation strips away the oppressive, claustrophobic atmosphere of the crowded sidewalks, offering a godlike perspective that was previously unimaginable. You grip the brass railing securely, absorbing the sheer, vertigo-inducing magnitude of a civilization that is physically reaching toward the clouds. Delicate scraps of gold leaf and crumbling Moroccan leather litter the scarred wooden workbench of a neighborhood book restorer, where the air smells heavily of acidic animal glues and decaying paper. You hand the craftsman a badly damaged volume of philosophical essays, watching intently as his nimble fingers assess the fragile, broken spine with absolute, clinical precision. He employs a small, bone-handled folder to smooth a new layer of linen backing, applying a firm, even pressure that perfectly adheres the supportive fabric. The restoration process promises to grant the neglected text a renewed, enduring lifespan, much like the second act you have deliberately crafted for your own unanchored existence. You lace up a pair of heavy, wooden-wheeled roller skates, pulling the stiff leather straps tightly across the arches of your sensible walking boots. The massive, hardwood floor of the public recreation pavilion gleams under the brilliant, sputtering arc of newly installed electric carbon lamps. You push off from the wooden barricade, immediately joining the counterclockwise flow of men and women gliding across the polished surface with varying degrees of chaotic grace. The deafening, rhythmic roar of hundreds of wooden wheels thundering against the pine floorboards echoes wildly off the arched, tin-paneled ceiling. This dizzying, communal exertion offers a radical, exhilarating form of physical freedom, allowing you to move through the world with a thrilling, unrestrained velocity while the rushing air pins loose strands of hair against your flushed cheeks. You inspect a vibrant spool of silk ribbon that transforms the cramped millinery shop into a riotous, colorful garden of artificial flora. The proud female proprietor stands before a three-way mirrored vanity, expertly pinning a dramatic, wide-brimmed felt hat entirely unsuited for modest, domestic obscurity. You run your bare fingertips over a delicate length of French lace, marveling at the intricate, interlocking geometric patterns woven into the sheer, fragile netting. A row of pristine, white plaster mannequin heads displays a daring collection of modern headwear, completely defying the subdued fashions forced upon the previous generation. You select a sharp, structural hat pin topped with a polished sphere of jet black glass, appreciating its dual function as both an elegant accessory and a potential weapon of self-defense. This vibrant commercial space serves as a subtle, creative rebellion, where unmarried women command the aesthetic choices that dictate how they present themselves to the public eye. You push open the heavy wooden doors of the neighborhood commercial laundry, instantly hit by a dense, suffocating wall of bleached steam and boiling lye. The overwhelming scent of concentrated starch and hot cotton hangs thickly in the air. This creates a stifling microclimate that smells entirely of grueling domestic labor. Dozens of women stand shoulder to shoulder at long wooden ironing boards. Their faces are flushed and dripping with perspiration in the oppressive, humid heat. You hand over a wrapped bundle of soiled shirtwaists to the exhausted forewoman, inhaling the alkaline tang of industrial soap that perpetually clings to her damp apron. The punishing atmosphere of this subterranean washhouse strips away any lingering romantic illusions about the harsh physical realities of female employment in the modern city. Clattering metal and snapping springs echo loudly through the narrow, dust-filled confines of the typewriter repair shop, where hundreds of dismantled machines sit haphazardly on stained wooden workbenches like the exposed skeletons of modern communication. You carefully step around a greasy puddle of dark machine oil. A young mechanic with blackened fingernails realigns a bent type bar with a pair of delicate iron pliers. The scent of mineral spirits and brass polish stings your nostrils as you hand him your own jammed carriage, hoping the intricate repair will not completely drain your modest weekly budget. This cluttered, mechanical sanctuary relies entirely on the rapid modernization of the workforce, directly supporting the independent female typists who refuse to return to the quiet, unpaid obscurity of the family parlor. You peer through the condensation-streaked window of a neighborhood confectioner. You are immediately mesmerized by the hypnotic, rhythmic pulling of hot sugar on a marble slab. The intoxicating, rich aroma of melting chocolate and toasted almonds seeps through the cracked doorframe, an undeniable temptation that effectively halts your brisk afternoon walk. A baker in a pristine white cap aggressively folds a thick, shimmering ribbon of golden caramel. His heavily muscled forearms strain against the incredible, sticky resistance of the cooling candy. You purchase a small paper cone of roasted, sugar-coated pecans, feeling the delightful, lingering warmth of the freshly made treats radiating directly through the thin parchment paper and into your chilled palms. The intense, sugary fragrance wraps around you like a comforting winter scarf, offering a brief, indulgent moment of pure sensory pleasure in the middle of a demanding metropolis. Massive crystal chandeliers suspend from the gilded, vaulted ceiling of the grand hotel lobby, casting a brilliant, fragmented light across the checkerboard marble floor. You sink into a deeply upholstered velvet armchair situated near a towering potted palm. From here, you observe the endless, choreographed parade of wealthy travelers and uniformed bellhops navigating the opulent space. The hushed, respectful murmurs of the elite clientele mix seamlessly with the melodic, classical tunes drifting slowly from a grand piano hidden in the adjacent lounge. You are not a registered guest in this luxurious establishment, but the sheer scale of the bustling room grants you a perfect, impenetrable cloak of invisibility among the chaotic wealth. This glamorous, transient intersection of global society allows an unmarried woman to sit entirely unbothered, claiming a tiny fraction of the exorbitant luxury without paying the steep price of admission. You crunch slowly along the frost-heaved gravel paths of the sprawling municipal cemetery. The heavy wool collar of your coat is pulled tight against the biting, relentless north wind. Towering granite obelisks and weeping marble angels stand as silent, freezing sentinels over generations of the city's dead, their carved names slowly blurring under decades of acidic industrial soot. You pause before a modest, lichen-covered headstone belonging to a woman who died decades ago, her entire earthly legacy reduced to a single name and the quiet designation of beloved sister. You place a single, vibrant red carnation against the frozen base of the monument, honoring a solitary life that likely mirrored your own uncelebrated defiance of the traditional path. The profound, unbroken silence of the burial ground offers a stark, comforting contrast to the frantic noise of the living city. Dust dances wildly in the narrow beam of afternoon sunlight piercing the cluttered, secretive back room of the Natural History Museum. You carefully run a bare finger along the smooth, polished edge of a mahogany display case containing hundreds of iridescent, perfectly preserved morpho butterflies pinned in strict geometric rows. The chemical odor of formaldehyde and arsenic preservative permeates the dry air, a harsh but necessary element in the ongoing scientific effort to freeze time and conquer decay. A female taxonomist in a linen smock meticulously adjusts the delicate, hollow wing bones of a stuffed falcon. She is entirely consumed by her precise, unglamorous labor in the pursuit of absolute biological accuracy. Her focused, solitary dedication strongly resonates with your own fiercely protected independence, proving that a woman can build a deeply satisfying existence completely surrounded by the fascinating, silent remnants of the natural world. You step carefully over the threshold of the subterranean cobbler's workshop. You are instantly greeted by the rhythmic, deafening strike of a steel hammer against an iron shoe anvil. The cramped, windowless room smells heavily of raw, tanned leather, thick rubber cement, and the pungent, earthy scent of accumulated street mud scraped from hundreds of worn soles. An elderly craftsman with thick, calloused hands runs a sharp skiving knife along the edge of your favorite walking boot. He smoothly peels away a long, curling ribbon of damaged brown leather before piercing the tough hide with his metal awl. You watch this hypnotic, repetitive motion, anticipating the sturdy, renewed structural integrity that will allow you to continue marching tirelessly across the unforgiving city pavements. Maintaining your own reliable transportation is a crucial, physical aspect of your absolute self-reliance. Harsh incandescent bulbs violently illuminate the stark, whitewashed waiting room of the neighborhood public dispensary. They cast unflattering shadows under the exhausted eyes of the waiting patients. The air is intensely saturated with the medicinal fumes of iodine, carbolic acid, and the sour, metallic tang of genuine human fear. You sit rigidly on a hard, wooden bench, offering a steady, reassuring presence to the trembling young boarding house maid who clutched your sleeve and begged for an escort to the intimidating doctor. A weary nurse in a heavily starched cap rushes past with a tray of sterilized glass syringes. Her brisk, unsentimental efficiency serves as a fragile barrier against the overwhelming tide of urban illness. This clinical environment strips away all pretense of polite society, exposing the raw, fragile nature of the human body while reinforcing the vital, unspoken necessity of women supporting each other through the darkest, most terrifying moments. You slip past the dense velvet curtains into the chaotic, windowless backstage corridor of the local vaudeville theater. The stagnant air is saturated with the overwhelmingly powdery scent of cheap theatrical grease paint and burning limelight. A troupe of exhausted acrobats stretches silently on the scarred wooden floorboards, their sequined costumes catching the erratic flicker of a single gas sconce. You deliver a freshly mended silk bodice to a frantic chorus girl, inhaling the pungent, metallic tang of her nervous perspiration. The transient, unconventional nature of this artistic underbelly offers a bizarre comfort to a woman who has also constructed a life entirely outside societal norms. Sawdust dances in the pale light filtering through the grimy windows of the neighborhood instrument repair workshop. The resonant, vibrating hum of a struck tuning fork cuts cleanly through the ambient street noise outside. A blind piano tuner sits hunched over a dismantled upright, his calloused fingertips tracing the tightly coiled copper strings with astonishing precision. You listen intently as he tightens a wooden peg, coaxing a perfectly pitched middle C from the battered wooden frame. The meticulous, auditory calibration requires an intense, isolated focus that completely ignores the visual chaos of the scattered ivory keys. You drop off a broken metronome for servicing, appreciating the profound dedication required to restore harmony to a damaged mechanism. You stand safely behind the iron railing of the observation catwalk, looking down into the terrifying, molten heart of the city's primary steel foundry. Blistering waves of invisible heat rise violently from the enormous smelting vats, instantly evaporating any moisture from your exposed skin. Goggled workers manipulate long steel poles with practiced, fluid motions, guiding rivers of glowing, liquid metal into heavily packed sand molds. The ambient temperature borders on unbearable, forcing a layer of sweat to bead instantly across your forehead and upper lip. Unstoppable progress. This brutal, thermal environment forged the very girders that support your modern independence, transforming raw, stubborn earth into towering architecture. Morning fog rolls thickly off the choppy surface of the industrial harbor, obscuring the hulking silhouettes of anchored cargo freighters. You grip the icy iron railing of the passenger ferry, watching the churning, white-capped wake stretch out behind the churning paddle wheel. Seagulls dive aggressively through the misty air, their erratic flight patterns offering a stark contrast to the slow, methodical ferry crossing. The cold, damp wind whips a rogue strand of hair across your vision, forcing you to blink against the stinging, salty spray. A cluster of immigrant laborious huddles tightly together on the open deck, their drab wool coats blending seamlessly into the gray, overcast horizon. You lean forward into the bracing gusts, captivated by the sheer, endless expanse of the dark water. The shifting, unpredictable tides perfectly mirror the ongoing, restless momentum of your own unanchored journey. You trace the smooth, polished curve of a carved mahogany parasol handle inside the cramped, dimly lit umbrella manufactory. Spools of waxed linen thread and piles of waterproofed canvas clutter the long workbenches, waiting to be stretched over flexible whalebone ribs. An elderly seamstress expertly stitches a taut canopy, her calloused thumbs effortlessly guiding the steel needle through the resistant, rubberized fabric. You purchase a sturdy, black walking umbrella with a reinforced steel shaft, finding deep satisfaction in acquiring a practical tool designed specifically to weather the inevitable storms. Bitter chicory coffee steams vigorously from a chipped porcelain mug resting on the communal dining table of your boarding house. The incredibly comforting aroma of frying bacon and toasted oats effectively banishes the lingering chill of the early winter morning. You spread a generous layer of preserved blackberry jam across a hearty slice of warm, crusty bread, savoring the bright, acidic burst of summer fruit against the rich, salty butter. 7 other unmarried women sit shoulder to shoulder along the wooden benches, exchanging sections of the daily newspaper in a comfortable, practiced silence. This shared, flavorful morning ritual provides a vital, sustaining foundation before everyone scatters into the demanding, unforgiving metropolis. You finish the last drop of the scalding brew, internally bracing yourself for another day of unyielding self-reliance. You step quietly into the crowded, oak-paneled gallery of the municipal courthouse, seeking shelter from a sudden, violent rainstorm. The booming, authoritative voice of a black-robed judge echoes sternly off the high, vaulted ceilings, demanding absolute order from the murmuring spectators. A defense attorney strikes his fist passionately against the solid wooden banister, the percussive thud reverberating through the hard, polished benches where you sit. The complex, adversarial cadence of the legal proceedings offers a fascinating, chaotic rhythm that completely drowns out the distant thunder rattling the tall, arched windows. You observe the scales of justice from a safe, elevated distance, grateful that your sovereign life has never required a man's legal defense. Frozen breath hangs suspended in the frigid, crystalline air above the crowded, oval surface of the municipal skating pond. You lace your leather boots tightly, feeling the stiff, unyielding material bite firmly into your woolen stockings to secure the steel blades. The glaring, midday sun reflects fiercely off the mirror-smooth ice, forcing you to squint against the blinding, fractured light. You push off from the wooden pavilion, immediately catching the smooth, effortless glide that transforms physical exertion into pure, floating momentum. Couples in matching wool scarves attempt complicated, synchronized maneuvers in the center, their laughter carrying brightly across the frozen expanse. You prefer the outer, less populated edges of the rink, carving deep, solitary arcs into the pristine surface with a rhythmic, sweeping motion. The intense, biting cold turns your cheeks a vibrant, flushed crimson, but the rapid circulation keeps your core aggressively warm, granting you an intoxicating, physical liberty that no rigid parlor setting could ever permit. Dawn breaks over the sprawling wholesale flower market with an overwhelming, intoxicating wave of crushed stems and blooming lilies. The vast, iron-roofed pavilion smells intensely of damp earth and sweet jasmine, completely masking the usual metallic odor of the surrounding city grid. Dozens of shouting vendors arrange heavy zinc buckets filled with vibrant, bruised petals that bleed color onto the wet concrete floor. You purchase a tightly bound sheaf of yellow chrysanthemums from a weary farmer whose hands are deeply stained with green sap. The sharp, peppery fragrance of the dense blooms clears your morning fog instantly, anchoring your senses to the waking world. This vibrant, chaotic garden thrives in the very center of concrete and steel, offering a vital, fragrant rebellion against the gray industrial landscape. You grip the leather-wrapped hilt of a flexible steel foil, feeling the wire mesh mask press snugly against your flushed cheeks and jawline. The echoing, wood-paneled gymnasium is filled with the sharp, rhythmic clash of crossing blades and the heavy thud of canvas shoes lunging across the polished floorboards. A strict instructress barks precise commands, her sharp voice demanding aggressive parries and unyielding physical confidence from a dozen unmarried women. You execute a rapid thrust, the sudden extension of your arms snapping the heavy canvas of your protective jacket with a loud, satisfying pop. This newly formed athletic club provides a radical, physical outlet for female energy that society desperately wishes to keep confined to quiet needlework. Sweating freely beneath the restrictive padding, you discover an intoxicating, muscular power that fundamentally alters how you walk through the dangerous city streets. Hardwood gavels strike heavily against solid oak podiums in the cavernous, velvet-draped gallery of the downtown auction house. The auctioneer speaks in a rapid, mesmerizing cadence, his booming voice bouncing wildly off the gilded ceiling as he takes bids on estate jewelry and imported tapestries. You stand quietly near the towering arched windows, observing the frantic, unspoken language of wealthy merchants signaling their offers with subtle nods and raised catalogs. A massive, glittering crystal chandelier catches the afternoon sunlight, throwing hundreds of fractured rainbows across the tense, silent faces of the competing bidders. You have absolutely no intention of purchasing the exorbitant heirlooms currently displayed on the revolving velvet stage. Watching this theatrical display of concentrated wealth simply amuses you, reinforcing your deep satisfaction with a life unburdened by the relentless accumulation of expensive, fragile objects. You climb the final, narrow iron staircase leading to the domed roof of the university's astronomical observatory as blistering summer heat radiates from the copper plating. The stagnant, sweltering air high above the city feels suffocating, pressing down on your shoulders like a physical, heavy woolen blanket. A lone female astronomer calibrates the massive brass telescope, her brow completely slick with perspiration in the intensely magnified sunlight pouring through the open viewing slit. You wipe a bead of sweat from your own temple, marveling at the colossal machinery designed specifically to map the vast, silent vacuum of deep space. The punishing, localized climate of the copper dome demands absolute physical endurance from anyone attempting to unlock the celestial mysteries. Looking up at the bright, hazy sky, you feel a profound connection to the solitary scientists who willingly endure extreme discomfort to expand the boundaries of human knowledge. You run your bare hands over a heavily embroidered bolt of silk brocade inside the cramped, shadowy confines of a neighborhood upholstery workshop. The tiny, cluttered storefront smells overwhelmingly of ancient horsehair stuffing, dried animal glue, and the distinct, dusty aroma of rotting Victorian velvet. An elderly craftsman sits cross-legged on a low wooden stool, forcing a thick, curved iron needle through a stubbornly stiff piece of tanned cowhide. You inspect a newly restored reading chair, admiring the firm, springy resistance of the fresh upholstery beneath your cautious, applied pressure. The meticulous, physical resurrection of discarded furniture mirrors your own continuous process of self-invention in a world that routinely discards unmarried women. You purchase a small scrap of the vibrant silk to line the bottom of your wooden jewelry box, taking a piece of this tactile history back to your private sanctuary. Whistles shriek with deafening, mechanical panic across the sprawling, smoke-choked expanse of the Central Railway switching yard. The elevated wooden signal tower trembles violently every time a massive freight locomotive thunders past on the tangled web of iron tracks below. You stand beside a grim-faced female telegraph operator who rapidly throws a series of heavy iron levers, forcefully rerouting tons of screaming steel with absolute, unblinking precision. The overwhelming cacophony of grinding brakes and venting steam makes conversation entirely impossible in this suspended, vibrating glass cabin. Her vital, demanding labor keeps the commercial arteries of the entire nation flowing safely without requiring a single ounce of public recognition. You absorb the staggering volume and kinetic chaos of the rail yard, deeply respecting the invisible women who confidently orchestrate the roaring machinery of the 20th century. You lean close to the thick, curved glass of the newly opened municipal aquarium, mesmerized by the eerie, undulating glow of a dozen translucent jellyfish. The darkened, subterranean exhibition hall is illuminated only by the watery, aquamarine light spilling from the massive, iron-framed display tanks. A diverse crowd of hushed spectators presses tightly against the brass railings, their faces painted in strange, shifting shades of deep blue and spectral green. You watch a sleek, predatory shark glide silently through the artificial kelp forest, its cold, unblinking eyes scanning the captive environment with terrifying efficiency. The complete absence of sound from the underwater creatures creates a bizarre, floating serenity that sharply contrasts with the loud, frantic city raging directly above. This submerged, alien world provides a breathtaking visual escape, proving that endless, silent mysteries still exist to be discovered by a solitary, observant mind. You press your thumbs into the soft, pliable edge of a newly dyed goatskin binding inside the cramped, noisy basement of a commercial bookbindery. The heavy, industrial air is thick with the sharp scent of acidic tanning chemicals and the sweet, lingering fragrance of boiling paste. A row of exhausted young women operates heavy iron pressing machines, utilizing their entire body weight to pull the massive, steel levers down with a rhythmic, mechanical clatter. You observe their synchronized, grueling labor with a deep, silent reverence, knowing these nameless workers are physically binding the very literature that fuels the modern intellectual revolution. The raw, stiff leather feels surprisingly warm against your skin, retaining the intense friction generated by the rapid, mechanical buffers. You leave the subterranean workshop with a profound appreciation for the immense, physical toll required to produce the elegant volumes resting safely on your private bookshelf. Red safe lights cast a sinister, bloody glow over the cramped, windowless interior of the commercial photographic darkroom. The stagnant air is unnervingly warm and reeks aggressively of harsh developing chemicals and acidic stop baths that sting the back of your throat. You stand beside an independent female photographer who gently agitates a floating sheet of expensive bromide paper inside a shallow, sloshing enamel tray. The slow, miraculous manifestation of a crisp black and white portrait blooming from the blank paper feels like witnessing a quiet, impossible magic trick. The oppressive, chemical heat of the sealed room causes a bead of sweat to trace a slow, agonizing path down your spine. This dark, toxic sanctuary is an essential crucible for preserving the fleeting truths of the modern era, revealing permanent images that the unforgiving city desperately tries to forget. You step into the dizzying, mechanical epicenter of the department store's massive typing pool, where 50 women strike brass keys in a deafening, unified roar. The wooden floorboards vibrate continuously beneath the soles of your boots, transmitting the relentless, percussive shockwaves of modern commerce straight up your legs. A stern female supervisor paces the narrow, orderly aisles with a heavy wooden metronome, enforcing a ruthless, standardized typing speed that leaves absolutely no room for human error. You hand a stack of handwritten inventory manifests to a clerk whose ink-stained fingers fly across the intricate machinery with a terrifying, automated grace. The sheer, overwhelming volume of the clattering typewriters creates an impenetrable wall of sound that completely isolates the working women from the leisurely, wealthy shoppers browsing the floors above. You retreat from the chaotic office with a ringing in your ears, deeply respecting the grueling, unglamorous stamina required to maintain your own prized financial independence. You stand at the edge of the yawning, muddy chasm cutting directly through the center of the avenue, marveling at the sheer scale of the subterranean excavation. Massive wooden timbers shore up the collapsing dirt walls, creating a dangerous, temporary cavern beneath the bustling city street. Sputtering arc lamps throw harsh, white light across the exhausted faces of immigrant laborists swinging heavy steel pickaxes into the bedrock. The raw, exposed belly of the metropolis looks like a wounded beast. It lays bare the complicated network of gas lines and water pipes usually hidden from polite society. You watch a horse-drawn cart struggle to navigate the precarious wooden planks serving as a temporary bridge over the gaping hole. The sheer architectural ambition of burying a train completely defies the natural order, yet it mirrors the unstoppable momentum of the new century. You pull your collar high against the flying grit, absolutely fascinated by the violent destruction required to build a modern future. You run a curious hand over the brass headlamp of a newly imported motorcar resting in the shadowy brick garage, ignoring the grease staining your pale leather gloves. The vulcanized rubber tires feel surprisingly solid, completely devoid of the delicate wooden spokes that define traditional horse-drawn carriages. A mechanic in oil-soaked overalls cranks a heavy iron handle at the front of the imposing machine. His muscles strain against the immense, mechanical compression of the engine. The engine suddenly backfires with a violent, concussive jolt that travels straight through the floorboards and rattles the fillings in your teeth. You step back from the vibrating chassis, feeling the intense, radiating heat pouring off the brass radiator grille. The pungent, chemical scent of refined petroleum completely dominates the enclosed space, permanently replacing the familiar, earthy smell of the city's livery stables. This terrifying machine represents a chaotic new freedom, severing the reliance on animal labor and promising an intoxicating, solitary speed. Porcelain clinks delicately against silver saucers in the brightly lit, airy expanse of the department store's top-floor tea room. The fragrant, floral aroma of Earl Grey steeps in a pristine ceramic pot, mingling beautifully with the sugary scent of tiered vanilla cakes and fresh strawberry preserves. You slice a warm, buttery scone with a dull silver knife, inhaling the rich, comforting fragrance of baked flour and sweet clotted cream. Hundreds of unescorted women fill the plush velvet chairs. Their animated conversations create a continuous, musical hum that floats above the string quartet playing in the corner. This luxurious, female-dominated space offers a vital, respectable sanctuary where you can comfortably dine alone without enduring the suspicious glares of traditional restaurateurs. You dab your lips with a stiff, starched linen napkin, enjoying the rare, indulgent privilege of spending your hard-earned wages on a fleeting, delicious luxury. The civilized atmosphere completely washes away the grime and aggressive noise of the industrial streets waiting just outside the gilded elevator doors. Intense, suffocating heat radiates from the sun-baked brick walls of the crowded tenement courtyard, trapping the stagnant, humid air in a narrow, vertical wind tunnel. Crisscrossing clotheslines droop heavily under the weight of wet, dripping linens, casting erratic, moving shadows over the cracked concrete pavement. You step carefully around a rusted iron water pump, feeling the oppressive, sticky dampness of the urban summer pressing firmly against your skin like a wet wool blanket. Exhausted mothers fan themselves with folded newspapers on the narrow iron fire escapes, seeking any miraculous breeze to cool their flushed faces. The overwhelming density of human life creates a localized, sweltering microclimate that simply refuses to cool down even as the afternoon sun finally dips below the rooflines. You wipe a persistent bead of sweat from your collarbone, deeply grateful for the private room waiting for you at the other end of the trolley line. This brutal, suffocating heat tests the absolute physical limits of the working class, exposing the harsh realities of surviving the industrial boom. You navigate the cramped, rebellious headquarters of the local suffragist newspaper, where heavy lead type drops into metal composing sticks with a sharp, continuous clatter. A massive, cast-iron platen press forcefully stamps down onto thick paper, the rhythmic, percussive thud rattling the dusty windows facing the busy street. You hand a stack of freshly proofed editorials to a woman with ink-stained forearms, raising your voice significantly to be heard over the relentless, mechanical roaring. The chaotic symphony of the printing process completely obliterates the traditional expectations of female behavior, physically manufacturing the very arguments that will dismantle the patriarchy. You fold a crisp, newly printed broadsheet. The satisfying crackle of the stiff paper adds another distinct note to the room's industrial chorus. This deafening, ink-soaked room is a vital battlefield, proving that the fight for equality requires massive, undeniable noise. You leave the building with the rhythmic thumping still echoing in your chest, energized by the undeniable sound of organized, female defiance. You observe the chaotic, winding lines of hopeful immigrants from the elevated wooden balcony of the vast, echoing registry hall. A dizzying mosaic of colorful wool shawls and battered leather trunks shuffles slowly toward the inspection desks under the pale light streaming through massive arched windows. Stern medical officers in pristine white coats quickly examine the exhausted arrivals, checking for highly contagious diseases with a terrifying, clinical efficiency. The sheer, overwhelming scale of human migration paints a vivid, moving portrait of desperation and hope against the stark, bureaucratic architecture of the government facility. You grip the polished brass railing, absolutely mesmerized by the tearful reunions and devastating rejections unfolding simultaneously across the crowded floor. This colossal gateway represents the raw, unfiltered churning of the American dream, exposing the heartbreaking vulnerability required to completely abandon your past. You turn away from the spectacle, acutely aware of the incredible privilege that allowed you to forge an independent life without fleeing a burning homeland. Rough, terracotta clay scrapes against the palms of your bare hands as you carefully reposition a heavy potted fern on the gravel-covered roof of your building. The coarse, damp potting soil feels surprisingly rich and grounding as you firmly pack it around the fragile, pale roots of a struggling tomato plant. You wipe a smudge of dark dirt from your forehead, enjoying the satisfying, granular friction against your damp skin in the late afternoon heat. Cultivating this small, elevated oasis requires constant, physical labor. It demands that you haul heavy watering cans up 4 flights of steep wooden stairs every single day. The sharp, serrated edges of a mature squash leaf brush aggressively against your forearm, a tiny, organic sting that connects you directly to the life cycle of the food you consume. This private, tactile sanctuary allows you to literally dig your hands into the earth, completely bypassing the sterile, concrete reality of the surrounding metropolis. You sit back on a weathered wooden crate, admiring the resilient, green defiance blooming stubbornly above the smog-choked city. You inhale the sharp, metallic tang of raw electricity in the dry air of the monumental generating station, feeling the invisible energy leave a distinct taste on the very back of your tongue. The overwhelming scent of heated copper wiring and hot, lubricated turbine bearings completely dominates the cavernous, brick-lined turbine hall. You stand near the massive, vibrating dynamos, fascinated by the pungent, chemical aroma that is actively banishing the era of gaslight and candle wax. A team of engineers in heavy canvas aprons monitors the glowing dials. The sharp smell of their stale pipe tobacco weaves through the industrial perfumes. This strange, synthetic fragrance represents the invisible, terrifying power coursing through the city's new grid, a force that feels almost magical yet smells entirely of human invention. You marvel at the concentrated, olfactory footprint of the modern age, a scent that promises absolute convenience while threatening to sever the final ties to the natural world. Leaving the vibrating facility, you carry the sharp, electric scent on your coat for hours. Biting winter wind howls through the narrow canyon of brick tenements, whipping your heavy wool skirt violently around your freezing ankles. You crane your neck to watch a daring lineman secured to the top of a towering wooden telephone pole, his body completely exposed to the brutal, freezing gusts. The massive web of black cables crisscrossing the gray sky blocks out the weak, watery sunlight, casting a permanent, icy shadow over the icy pavement below. You tuck your numb fingers deeply into your coat pockets. You shiver as the plunging temperature threatens to crack the very mortar holding the city together. The raw, unprotected climate emphasizes the dangerous, physical sacrifice required to connect the comfortable, steam-heated parlors of the wealthy elite. You hurry past the frozen construction zone, deeply grateful for the reliable, cast-iron radiator waiting in your solitary room. This aggressive cold serves as a harsh reminder that nature still commands the ultimate authority over the fragile, modern grid. You pause outside the unmarked wooden door of a sprawling garment factory, instantly assaulted by the deafening, frantic chatter of 200 industrial sewing machines. The rapid, mechanical stabbing of steel needles through thick denim creates a continuous, high-pitched whine that completely vibrates through the hallway floorboards. Rows of exhausted immigrant women feed fabric into the hungry mechanisms. Their desperate, rhythmic labor forms a relentless, percussive roar that destroys any possibility of normal conversation. You deliver a signed petition for shorter working hours to the exhausted floor manager, having to literally shout your intentions over the overwhelming, industrial din. The sheer, punishing volume of the sweatshop exposes the brutal human cost of mass-produced fashion, drowning out the individual voices of the women trapped at the pedals. You escape down the narrow stairwell, your ears ringing violently from the concentrated noise of exploitation. The terrifying symphony of progress leaves a lasting, uncomfortable echo long after you step back onto the relatively hushed avenue. The sun finally dips